The biggest winner in NBA history isn't Michael Jordan, it's not Phil Jackson or Bill Russell. With 16 NBA championship rings, it's Red Auerbach, legendary coach and general manager of the Boston Celtics. Auerbach was a basketball pioneer who introduced the fast break to the NBA. He was also the first person to draft a black player and hire a black head coach. Many of his principles were copied by some of the most successful coaches in NBA history, like Pat Riley and Greg Popovich. And when you see players smoking cigars after they win the NBA title, it's a tradition that came from Red, who used to light up after every blowout win. This is the story of Red Auerbach, the man who built the Boston Celtics. Auerbach's real name was Arnold, but because of his ginger hair, everybody called him Red. Young Red was a basketball fanatic, and he was among the best players in New York at the high school level. In college, Red was the team captain and the leading scorer in the city of Washington. But because he had asthma and was only 5'9", college ball was the furthest he could go. However, basketball was his calling, so Red did everything possible to stay connected to the game. In 1940, Red became a gym teacher and basketball coach for a high school team, after which he coached for the U.S. Navy team, and for a while, he even worked as a referee. Red had no experience in professional sports, but after Washington millionaire Mike Uline heard about his passion for the game, he hired Auerbach to coach the Washington Capitals in the newly founded Basketball Association of America, BAA. With the Capitals, Red quickly gained the reputation for being extremely tough on his players in practice. But as a result, the Capitals were better conditioned than any other team in the league. During his first year in 1947, Washington went 49-11, setting the league record for consecutive wins at 17. In his third season, the Capitals reached the finals, but against the Lakers and the most dominant player in the world, George Mikan. They lost 4-2. The ultra-competitive Red felt that the team needed some fresh blood, but the owner did not want to sign new players, so the angry Red quit. And in the 1949-50 season, when the BAA and the National Basketball League, NBL, united and created a league under the name that we still know today as the NBA, Red became the coach of the Tri-Cities Blackhawks. But after the Blackhawks owner traded a player without letting Red know about it, Auerbach again quit after just one season. Because of his fiery temper and 2 early exits just 4 years into his coaching career, Red's future in the NBA was in jeopardy. Luckily for him, when the Boston Celtics owner Walter Brown got fed up with his team losing all the time, he formed an advisory board to make a recommendation for the next head coach, and they all gave the same name, Auerbach. However, Red's career in Boston turned into a disaster before he even coached a single game. In the 1950 draft, the whole state of Massachusetts wanted a gifted player out of local Holy Cross College, Bob Cousy. And yet, Auerbach didn't want to hear about it. Am I supposed to win or please the local yokels? Jokingly adding that Cousy had too much hair for his liking. So, the Celtics passed on Cousy during the draft, to a great distaste of the Celtics fans. However, Cousy refused to play for the Blackhawks, the team that drafted him, and the Chicago Stags, who had the next pick, went bankrupt. So, against all odds, Cousy became a Celtic. But what happened next changed NBA history forever. With the 12th overall pick, Auerbach selected Chuck Cooper, who became the first black player drafted to the NBA. With that move, Red broke the racial barrier in the NBA, daring to make a move that most were not ready for at the time. When the season started, the relationship between Auerbach and Cousy improved. With Cousy's brilliance as a playmaker and drafting another Hall of Fame guard in Bill Sharman, the Celtics played very well over the next few seasons, consistently making the playoffs. And it was during this time that Auerbach began smoking his famous victory cigars on the bench, which became his trademark. I decided if we had a game comfortably in hand, I'd light up a cigar and just sit back. That ended up becoming the signal to people that we'd won the game, so guys started calling it my victory cigar. Auerbach. His opponents hated his cigar smoking, but so did some of the Celtics. Once he went for the cigar, the other team's intensity went up 100%. I hated that thing. Bob Cousy. Though Auerbach lit up plenty of cigars in these years, he had not yet smoked after the final game of the season, as the Celtics kept losing in the playoffs. And after 10 years in the league, Auerbach had not yet won a title. He was earning a reputation for being a coach that couldn't take his team over the hump. To take his team to the next level, Auerbach needed a superstar player. He needed Bill Russell. But as the Celtics were never bad enough to get the top pick in the draft, getting a top collegiate player like Russell was almost impossible. And that's when Auerbach's genius came into play, reshuffling the deck in his favor. Auerbach first traded All-Star Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan to the St. Louis Hawks to move up in the 1956 NBA draft and secure the second pick. The Hawks didn't want to draft Russell because their owner was racist, so they were glad to make the deal with the Celtics. Still, Red needed another miracle because the Rochester Royals also wanted Russell, and they were picking number 1. Since the Celtics owner also owned the Ice Capades, a hit ice skating traveling show, Auerbach convinced Rochester to pass on Russell in exchange for several Ice Capades performances over the years. The puppeteering worked, and with Russell on board, the Celtics made the finals for the first time in franchise history, and it was against the Hawks. It was a matchup that held enormous significance because of the Russell trade and the racial tension he faced in every game in St. Louis. Before the start of Game 3 of the finals, the Celtics complained that one of the baskets in St. Louis was lower than prescribed, after which the Hawks owner Ben Kerner ran up to Auerbach and cursed him out. Auerbach did not like to be yelled at, and he especially didn't like racists. So he knocked Kerner flat out, which earned him a lot of respect and admiration in Boston. In today's NBA, a coach who hit an owner would probably get suspended and banned for life. But in the 50s, Red was only fined $300 after the game, and he continued to coach Game 3 like nothing ever happened. The Celtics, however, did lose that game, but the series was incredibly close, and after 6 games, it was tied at 3 games apiece. In Game 7, there was no winner in regulation, nor after the overtime. And then finally, in the second OT, the Celtics managed to break the Hawks, winning their first ever NBA title. Next year, the same opponents made the finals, and the Celtics were the heavy favorites for a repeat. However, after Bill Russell injured his ankle and missed 2 games of the series, the Hawks won the championship in 6 games. But this loss in 1958 would mark the only playoff series Boston lost for the next 8 years. With 8 NBA championships in a row, the Celtics became the biggest dynasty in NBA and American sports history. And without diminishing Russell's greatness, Cousy's playmaking, Tom Heinsohn's scoring, and the versatility of Sam Jones and John Havlicek, the biggest reason for the Celtics' success was Auerbach. Auerbach instilled something he called the Celtics pride, which was a code that every Boston player had to honor and live by. When he was asked about how he motivates his players, Red simply answered, "Pride of excellence, pride of winning." I tell our guys, isn't it nice to go around all summer and say that you're a member of the greatest basketball team in the world? Auerbach was always regarded as a coaching genius, but he wasn't some revolutionary X's and O's guy. During his time in Boston, the Celtics only had 7 basic set plays. But Red's true value was extracting the most out of everybody, making his guys play as a true team, and keeping everybody in line with his system.
Our practice sessions are tough, and we play a long, hard season.
Red hated stats, and to him only one statistic mattered: scoring more points than the opponent. Auerbach never put focus on one individual player, and he looked at his players as a single living organism, where each player contributed in their own way. Many of his players were Hall of Famers who could have had better individual stats if they played somewhere else, but Auerbach made everybody buy into the team concept, with no exception. And if a player didn't want to play by his rules, they were traded. Individual honors are nice, but no Celtic has ever gone out of his way to achieve them. We have never had the league's top scorer. In fact, we won 7 league championships without placing even one among the league's top 10 scorers. For Red, he believed that the best shooter on the team had to shoot more than others, but that the others had to shoot the ball enough to keep the offense balanced. And Wilt Chamberlain, the Celtics and Bill Russell's biggest rival, completely agreed with Auerbach.
If Wilt Chamberlain played for the Boston Celtics, he would have taken away from maybe a Heinsohn, maybe a Sam Jones, maybe a Cousy, because I could put the ball in the basket and I would take some of their shots away from them. And that might not have been for the perfect team.
Because of Red and his core values, the Celtics were the first organization to popularize the concept of the role player and celebrate the value of the sixth man. While not starting would create jealousy and imbalance in other franchises, this was never the case with the Celtics. This was their secret weapon. That's where a lot of coaches make a lot of mistakes. They used their 5 best players, not the 5 who are going to win. The value of harmony and putting the team before the individual was a big reason why the Celtics kept winning year after year, and why they could seamlessly plug in younger players when their vets got older. It was a win-win scenario, because the younger players had veterans ready to teach them and not fight them for playing time. Auerbach was also a big believer in basketball fundamentals, and he always wanted his players to play as simple as possible and as hard as they possibly could. This meant not dribbling the ball too much and remembering that passing is the fastest method of advancing the ball.
No pass is a good one unless you catch it.
And resting on defense was the biggest transgression of them all. You can make 1,000 mistakes as long as you hustle, said 6-time All-Star Tom Heinsohn. But Red wasn't just the Celtics head coach. He was also the general manager, the team's road manager, and a scout. He was working 16 hours a day, putting all his heart and soul into the team. The job and all the duties he was handling in the 50s and 60s are now done by more than a dozen assistant coaches, video analysts, and advanced scouts. This hectic schedule took a big toll on Red, and so he decided to retire after the 1966 season. In the last regular season game in 1966 against the Cincinnati Royals, the Royals management gave out 5,000 cigars to fans, in a plan that the entire arena lit up their cigars after they beat the Celtics. When Auerbach got word of this stunt, he stormed into the locker room and gave a fiery pregame speech. To little surprise, the Celtics destroyed the Royals, and the only one who smoked the victory cigar was Red. Boston then defeated the Royals in the first round of the playoffs, whooped Wilt and the Sixers, and in Auerbach's last NBA Finals as the head coach, Boston beat the Lakers in another 7-game classic. After 9 titles in 10 years and 20 overall seasons as an NBA head coach, Auerbach stepped down, retiring as the all-time leader in wins and winning percentage. From the 1967 season onward, Red was the general manager for the Celtics, handing over the coaching duties to Bill Russell, who served as a player coach. Auerbach, the Celtics, and Russell made history once again, because Bill became the first black head coach in NBA history, and the first black coach in any major sport in America.
I think that's the first time I ever remember that a coach or a manager has been appointed and there was questions about his qualifications, which irritated me to no end, because I knew it was strictly a racial thing.
Without Red on the bench, the Celtics immediately relinquished the crown and were finally defeated by Chamberlain and his 76ers, not even making the finals. But Russell was too proud, too relentless, and too good to fail, and he led Boston to 2 more championships against Wilt, after which he retired as both a player and a coach. Since 1956, when Russell got drafted, the Celtics won an unprecedented 11 out of 13 championships. However, after Russell's retirement, many wondered if Auerbach could win without a superstar center, and despite all those titles, Red entered a new decade with a chip on his shoulder. In the first season without Russ, the Celtics had a losing season and missed the playoffs for the first time since Auerbach joined the team in 1950. But unlike ever before, this meant the Celtics had a high draft pick, which Auerbach used on Dave Cowens, an undersized 6'8" center, joining him with Havlicek and second-year point guard JoJo White. Cowens wasn't a defender like Russell, but he was a better scorer and a phenomenal rebounder. And soon, their new Big Three started dominating, winning 2 more championships in 1974 and 1976. As the decade came to a close, the Celtics got older and started to struggle again. But because they missed the playoffs in 1978, they again had a high draft pick. Unfortunately, the 1978 draft wasn't rich in talent, and Red didn't believe he could draft a superstar to lead his franchise to new championships. Except there was one player he believed could become a superstar in the NBA, Larry Bird. But there was a big problem. Bird was still a junior at Indiana State, and NBA rules stated that players had to be in college for 4 years before they were drafted. Furthermore, Bird had made it clear that he would be returning to play collegiate basketball the next year. So, no NBA GM really gave much thought about drafting Larry, except Auerbach. Because Bird enrolled at Indiana University in 1974, but dropped out only a few weeks into his first semester, by technicality, he was eligible to get drafted. However, drafting him was very risky, because Larry could re-enter the draft after his senior season, but Auerbach was willing to gamble. With the 6th pick in the 1978 draft, the Celtics picked Bird. which was a shock to the rest of the NBA. Larry went on to win 33 games in a row and the Collegiate Player of the Year award, after which he considered entering the draft because he knew he was going to be drafted first overall in 1979. But then Auerbach visited his home in French Lick, Indiana, and offered him the biggest salary on the Celtics, and Bird agreed to stay. And Red wasn't done there. In the 1980 draft, Auerbach executed a maneuver that was dubbed the Steal of the Century, after he hoodwinked the Warriors to give him the number 3 overall pick and Robert Parrish in exchange for the 1st and 13th pick. Auerbach then drafted Kevin McHale, who he wanted all along, and knew that he was going to be available at number 3. So, with the big 3 of Bird, McHale, and Parrish, which many believe to be the greatest front court in NBA history, the Celtics immediately won the championship in 1981. In 1984, the Celtics won again, but while Auerbach was smoking his victory cigars, he was always thinking about the next move. In October 1984, Auerbach traded Gerald Henderson, one of the heroes of the Celtics title campaign that year, to the Seattle Supersonics in exchange for the right to a first-round draft pick in 1986. Before the 1986 season began, Red signed Bill Walton, who was once the best player in the NBA, but because of his ankles and constant injuries, nobody wanted anything to do with him. Well, nobody except Red. The risk paid off. Walton was the perfect complementary piece off the bench, and the Celtics won their 3rd title in 5 years. After that season, because of that supersonic pick Red traded for 2 years prior, immediately after the championship parade, Boston had another reason to celebrate, because they got the number 2 pick in the draft, all thanks to Red's genius planning. The Cleveland Cavaliers had the right to the 1st pick, and since centers were always the first picks back then, Auerbach knew that the Cavs would select North Carolina center Brad Daugherty. And after the Cavs selected Daugherty, Red Auerbach could start celebrating. He got what he wanted, and that was Len Bias, the best collegiate player, and the guy who they projected would be even better than Michael Jordan.
He's the guy we wanted, and we got him.
Adding Bias to a core of Bird, McHale, and Parrish made the Celtics seem unbeatable, and the dynasty that could last another decade. But unfortunately, tragedy struck. Just 2 days after being drafted, Len Bias died from a cocaine overdose.
Len Bias, the Maryland University basketball star on his way to becoming a world champion Boston Celtic, died of an apparent heart attack today at Leland Memorial Hospital in Prince George's County.
Len's death really affected Auerbach. Red knew the Bias family personally, and he never recovered from this tragedy, and neither did the Celtics. They made the finals again in 1987, but after Bird and McHale suffered serious injuries, the Celtics dynasty disintegrated. In 1990, Auerbach was 73 years old, and he was ready to change roles within the Celtics. And after 40 years, he no longer wanted to have the final say on coaching hirings, signing players, and making trades. Despite no longer being the Celtics' ultimate boss, Auerbach was still the team president and an essential part of the organization, helping coaches and advising the front office. He fulfilled his role as the president until 1997, and one of the last pieces of advice was for the Celtics during the 1996 draft, when he wanted Boston to draft Kobe Bryant. The old fox believed that Kobe was the best player in the draft, but he didn't want to impose his will on the team anymore, ultimately leaving the decision to acting general manager M.L. Carr, who drafted Antoine Walker. Who knows? If they kept listening to Red, the Celtics' title lead over the Lakers could have been way bigger.